welcome to Pathways, where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. Today, we explore the question of how science and spirituality intersect. With questions like, does the physics of consciousness have you scratching your head? Are you fascinated by the mysterious power of human intention to make things happen? Today's Pathways conversation is about the breakthrough research of psychoenergetic science. And our guest is Nisha Manek, co-author of the new book, Bridging Science and Spirit, the genius of WilliamATiller's physics and the promise of information medicine. Nisha was born on the equator in the village of Olkalu in the Nyahururu district in the highlands of Kenya. She graduated summa cum laude from the Case Western Reserve University, after which she received her doctorate in medicine from Glasgow University School of Medicine in Scotland. She completed her fellowship in rheumatology at Stanford University Medical Center and joined the faculty there as assistant professor of medicine, at Mayo Clinic. She is an invited faculty member for the Associate Fellowship Program in Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona. Dr. Manek has authored more than a dozen book chapters for academic medical textbooks. Hello, Nisha, and welcome to the Pathways Show.
Hey, good morning, Paul. Nice to be with you.
Now, coming from the field of medicine, what made you want to study physics?
Yes. Well, one of the themes in this life for Nisha is to really seek the truth of what we are as humans. And science is a very powerful way to know nature, to know ourselves. And what better field than medicine, okay? But medicine has somehow locked us into just a model of chemical medicine. And so I was sort of pushing against the boundaries all the time. I knew there's much more to healing and to well-being than just prescriptions. And what better way than to explore the question of energy medicine? That's how I really went into physics. Energy. What is energy? And physics was the natural science to go into that question, explore.
Let's describe for our audience what your book is about, because to quote you towards the end of the book, you say, I consider this book as a work in progress, akin to a status report of where we are at in intention research and information medicine.
Right. So the title is Bridging Science and Spirit, and I am joining two towering ways of self-knowledge, science and spirit. Okay, and so humanity goes through science, its protocols, but the other part of self-knowledge is spirit, is contemplative and meditative practices, which have their own protocols and outcomes. So I'm joining them. I'm saying they're no different. They're not actually dichotomous or distinct. Each informs the other. So I'm joining them up. But the bigger mindset, you might say, is in the subtitle, the genius of WilliamATiller, who actually does join these two aspects of knowledge. And I also say information medicine. Well, what is that? I'd never heard of information medicine. I knew energy, I knew chemistry, but what is information medicine?
Yeah, well, what is it?
So when I contacted Tiller, I was so interested in this whole notion of subtle energies because I can feel it. When I do yoga, when I do Tai Chi, I feel certain things in my body, but we can't detect it. We can't detect subtle energies with usual instruments. And here's the thing. When I recall my medical school days and dissecting the body, looking at pathology, histochemistry, and all of those wonderful things, we do not see the acupuncture system. It's invisible, but it's very, very real. And so when I stumbled into WilliamATiller's papers, What is Subtle Energies, and some of his other work published in medical journals, it grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand his work, his equations, and I reached out to him. When we first met, when I finally got his attention, He said, Nisha, you know chemistry, you know energy, but what I want us to develop is information medicine. And I thought, what is that? And here it is in a nutshell. Paul, your thoughts are incredibly powerful. If you focus your thoughts into a single intention, that's even more powerful. And Tiller shows unequivocally your thoughts, your intention is a source of energy that does work. I thought,
He
wow, if you can link intention to energy, now we have a very powerful paradigm.
And in your book, you talk about several experiments whereby he demonstrates that you can actually measure the impact of intention.
Absolutely. In his physics lab, he was a professor of physics at Stanford University. And Tiller is quite unusual because not only is a giant in conventional physics, mathematics and all of the wonderful scientific methods, but he was a giant in inner management. He was a meditator for years, decades. Okay. So he knew the outer methods and he knew the inner, disciplines, and he joined the two. And he showed that intention can change a material thing out there. You can actually impact just with your thinking something like water, something like human enzymes, something like fruit flies, which is a lab method to understand biology. So if your thinkingness can impact something out there to such a measurable degree, wow, it's time we paid attention. This is really crucially important.
So this speaks ultimately to the power of consciousness. And
Exactly.
he showed that
Mhm.
consciousness is not localized in your brain, and that
No.
intention is a process of creative consciousness.
So we have this notion in medicine that consciousness somehow is emanating from your brain. Completely nonsense. It's nonsense. I'm going to use that word. Consciousness is unbounded. It's an everywhere field phenomena. It's not locked in our brains and in our skulls. And so when Tiller told me, Nisha, your consciousness is not your brain, it was a big disruption. You have to really get your mind around this. Okay. So consciousness also is the content of consciousness is many things. It can be consciousness of love. It can be consciousness of intelligence. It can be consciousness of willingness. So we now come into this notion of levels of consciousness. And the power goes up the more and more you work from the heart. That was very, very crucial for me to get where Tiller was coming from.
So, what's the relationship between subtle energies and consciousness? Is consciousness an expression of subtle energies?
Well, subtle energies is the pathway in your body. That's what nature's gift is. It's already inbuilt into your body. That's the meridian system. So, how does intention rev up that subtle energy? It's by your intention. Once you stand on your mat, Paul, you had a yoga class. Once you stand on the mat and you say, let's hold an intention for this class, then you anchor into your breath. What are you doing? You're using your tool of intention, which is your consciousness, making a decision, and now you're revving up your meridian system to benefit your body. So intention and subtle energies are linked. But your consciousness, your decision is always within your control. It is
Right.
your conscious mind making a stand, a singular purpose.
Right. Now, in your you have these pillars in the book, the bridge
Yeah.
pillar, and it's divided into seven of them in the book. What does that mean, bridge pillar, and what is why did you choose a structure called that?
You know, like I said, we have two major ways of knowledge, to understand nature, which is science and spirit. The word bridge was very important to take the reader from the first pillar, which is where we are in science. How did we arrive there? Giving a little nugget of the history, and then taking the reader into consciousness, where we are. And I say it's not the brain. I take them to some of the fundamentals of energy, which is thermodynamics, energy and work. Then pillar number 4, covers Tiller's experiments in his intention having an impact on materials. Then I show the impact, one of the major things he actually uncovered into why intention is so important, which is space. I showcase information medicine in pillar number 6, and then we verify Tiller's model in pillar number 7. So the reader has all of the knowledge and walks across the bridge comfortably with each knowledge. He builds that into his own consciousness and arrives at spirit. And I say it's a work in progress because everybody is at different stages. You can build on the pillars and each knowledge in your own way and know that you're on a safe bridge. It will stand the test of time.
It's
This
amazing.
bridge, yes,
I found the book to be an amazing summary of the history of modern science leading up to this ultimate bridge, which is the intersection between science and spirituality. I learned so much from
yes,
reading this book. I thought your take on information was interesting. You say the most fundamental aspect of the universe and reality is information. It's more fundamental than matter or energy. What do you
yes.
explain that for us?
Yes, so we think of information as digital, um, numbers and this pictures that we're seeing each other in. That's information, okay? But information is far more than that. Let me give you an example which I've used before. You have a bookshelf behind you, Paul. What if we tipped it over and just caused chaos in your office? Every book is on the floor. And Paul has to now use energy to put each book back on the shelf.
It would probably be
But
a big
it takes
improvement.
information. But it takes information to know which book goes where.
Right.
Energy by itself is not useful. You need information to organize it.
Hmm.
Information is very important. And also, just imagine, intention is invisible. Your thought is invisible, right? That's intention, but you clothe it somehow in a medium. Here, I'm using speech to create a shared experience. Tiller wrote it out. He created something in the written word to communicate to his imprinting team, his graduate students. So information then shapes your energy.
Right. And you make a point in the book that
Information is more fundamental. And actually, physics agrees.
you make the point in your book
Go ahead.
that Tiller would he said that writing your intentions down was a kind of an important element of having a strong intention that was going to make a difference.
Absolutely. So again, intention is invisible. You can speak it. Speech is a very powerful way of giving shape to your invisible intent. For Tiller, it was writing it out. He would go into meditation and actually write out. And this he did say with the water experiment. And he's a physicist, it would write hydrogen increased by a factor of 10. And then he did something very interesting. He did something very interesting, and it hits me hard even today when I think about what he did. Thy will be done. That's the Lord's Prayer. He's saying, show me, God or divine, show me the truth in this intention. It's not about my will. It's not about anybody else's will. Thy will be done. God, show me the power of the human spirit. Action, it's taking shape in this intent. So that was the link to spirit.
Right.
He's invoking spirit.
So the really powerful thing about Tiller's work, and there's so many aspects to it, both in the realm of pure science, but it seems to me the most significant thing, and the thing you're bringing out in this book, is that he uses science to offer some proof to the power of spiritual activities. Can you?
Absolutely. So, we have known scripture, seek and ye shall find, knock the door will be open. We know that these are ancient truths. Tiller brings a fresh perspective that science shows this to be true. Be one-minded, ask for the truth, and you will be answered. He did it with the scientific method. And in the final pillar, I do say something. I wrote, and this I remember so clearly in our Thursday meeting when I questioned Tiller. I said, I still don't know if science can get to consciousness. He said, Nisha, science is a way to self-knowledge. Master Jesus has always said, know thyself. So what every endeavor can lead you back to yourself, even science. Don't brush it aside. And to me, that one sentence really belongs. Science is a way to self-knowledge in that final pillar. So it gave me great respect to what Tiller was really all about. He
Right.
never brushed spirit aside and he never brushed science. They were both united in his life. That's how he
Right.
lives.
You know, in your Bridge Pillar 6 chapter, you talk about
Mhm.
subtle energy and information medicine for the 21st century.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask you, you bring up acupuncture.
Mhm.
And of course, we can't measure chi, or can we? I mean, did Tiller figure out a way to measure this, these meridians and the energy flow?
Yes, you can. You can measure them. And I give the example in the very opening part of Pillar 6 about the healers. They're very talented Qigong masters. And he did some very unusual experiments in Kansas. It was with another group in Kansas. Oh, I think it was Kansas University. And he put the healer into a room and there were probes all through their bodies. And every time they made an intention, you could actually see the equivalent electromagnetic signals out there, their tracers. But here's the thing, subtle energy is not electromagnetic. Internally, it's a magnetoelectric impulse. It's like saying, let's move this magnet, and it creates electricity outside. Okay, electromagnetism is out there, but inside of us, it's magnetoelectric. And I know I'm putting out certain definitions which will not be familiar. We're at a very early stage, but this takes us a little further ahead in the field. Our instruments are electromagnetic, not magnetoelectric. Okay, we haven't reached those detectors yet. So that's the difference. Your acupuncture system is magnetoelectric, and yes, scientists who know this mathematics can put a number on it, can
Okay.
measure it. Okay, the healers have great big impulses. They're able to generate huge signals. You and I, Paul, at least for I should really speak for myself. I do generate, I feel it, but it's very little and it lasts a day or so and then it dissipates. Unless you keep practicing Qigong and Tai Chi, you can really pump up that pump, that energy pump. And it's a very important practice.
There was something you said in that same chapter that I found fascinating, and it's, I'll just quote you: consciousness beats lifestyle. What does that mean?
Yes. So let me explain. The more you become higher in your awareness, if you move from pride to willingness to intellect to the heart, you're always increasing your levels of power. Okay, you're reaching to Christ consciousness. When you're there, you don't need to take all of these funky things and vitamins. They're important at our level of development. So the more you are aware, that beats any lifestyle. Let me give you an example. Since we're in COVID-19 pandemic, right,
Yes,
we're
please.
dealing with a huge challenge. And here's what I tell people: do the science. And here's what I give for the scientific, and I know this to be true. Take vitamin D, take 5,000 international units daily, you're going to prime your immune system. Add some zinc, 200 milligrams a day, you're going to prime your immune system. Okay, wear your mask when you're outside. This is what the science shows us. Okay, well and good. But now let's rev up the spiritual side. Let's rev up the consciousness side. So when you observe anxiety come up into your awareness, be with it. Don't brush it aside. Be with the anxiety of being infected, of your businesses, of your family. All of these anxieties are percolating. Stay with the anxiety and anchor into your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, Breathe out slowly. And watch what happens to that discomfort. It will start to dissipate. And if it doesn't, drop your awareness into your heart. The heart is the finest register we have. Once you do that and stay there, the discomfort will start to go away. Now you're raising your consciousness. Okay, you're revving up your acupuncture system, and that is the juice. That energy will do everything for the science part. Okay.
Okay. So what is the alternative? What do most people do? They resist the anxiety. And
Yes,
how
they
does that?
succumb to the fear. They're succumbing to the fear. Don't be fearful. Rise up your consciousness, and you have the gift of breath. You have the gift of awareness in your heart, and know that you are going into a very powerful healing system, which is your subtle energy pumps. You're going to do that naturally. Yes, do the science. Don't resist that, but bring in the spirit and bring in your conscious awareness.
So do you see this COVID pandemic as an opportunity for spiritual development?
Absolutely.
Hmm. For
Absolutely.
the reasons you just pointed out. Because
Yes. Yes.
if we can learn to accept reality and not resist it and not let it take over our psychic system, we're actually going to become stronger as a result of that.
You see, COVID-19 is here. We're going to live with it. As we've lived with many, many infections and many, many challenges, we will overcome. But as a species, Homo sapiens, we are being called to really rise in our own consciousness. We're being called to become Homo spiritus. We're becoming an awakened species. Okay? And this is an opportunity, like Tiller says, science is a way to self knowledge. COVID-19 is a way to self knowledge. We use every opportunity to let life flow. Don't resist. Let life flow through you.
And
Growing.
it's pretty important to have a clear intention in order to evolve along this
Yes.
path of consciousness, of raising consciousness. So that it all gets back to the tool of intention, which is a big part of what this book is all about.
Exactly. Your power of intention is your power to create. Create your reality from moment to moment. Stop practicing it. Use it. It's your tool for greater being.
Right. It's amazing how your book, which is basically a report on science and on Tiller's experiments, and there's so much information in your book, but it's also
Yes.
subtly, it's kind of a handbook for higher consciousness.
Absolutely, it is. For those who are ready, they'll make the jump. And I know readers who have written to me that finally I know how all of this thing fits. It
Right.
was a bit here, a bit there, but now I can see and I can dive into each pillar if I want to. Because these are short nuggets. I wanted to construct the bridge. I was an engineer in that sense. And I wanted to link the ideas, 52 ideas, so that the reader can go right up to spirit. And you can go right to spirit. You don't even have to read all this other stuff if you don't want. But know that you are a spiritual being having a physical existence. That part of you is indestructible. The physical will change, it'll adapt, it'll go through challenges, but ultimately grow in spirit. Is indestructible. And for me, that realization gives me much freedom, gives me a lot of peace.
And why is that? Because you feel you have agency.
Well, I know that my growth in spirit, that consciousness always is untouched. And
Uh,
that was my willingness to go there. And that was my biggest, I think, gift from Tiller, to be
yeah,
with him, to learn from him, and to know that I can use medical science, but I teach my patients this. And they come away with a greater sense of control of their own, in their own little lives, in their own homes, in their own challenges, in their own stories. They can rise.
yeah. Well, I wish we had a lot more time because there's so much to explore. And it's
Yes.
obvious to me that you are the perfect person to write a book like this. And I want to thank you for doing it. And I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Paul, it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I see the Buddha behind you. And, I write about the Buddha's relics.
Yeah, I know. That was fascinating. We could have talked about that too. There's so much more. I hope people pick up your book. And I want to be sure to tell our listeners about your website, which is nishamanek.com. That's
Yes.
NISHAMANEKMD.com. And I'm sure that they could find out about your work and more about the book on your website.
Yes. Thank you, Paul.
And for those who may have tuned in to Pathways late today, this is your host, Paul O'Brien, author of Intuitive Intelligence, a book that shares the theme of pathways, which is personal and cultural evolution. Now, don't worry, you can play or share this interview whenever you want via the internet or as a free podcast, and I'll tell you how in a minute. Today, we've been visiting with Nisha Manek, author of Bridging Science and Spirit, the genius of WilliamATiller's physics and the promise of information medicine. I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into Pathways, which is broadcast and streamed on the internet at www.kboo.fm every other Sunday morning at 8:30 USA Pacific Time. Even better, podcasts of today's show, which you can listen to and forward to others, are available for free at divination.com. That's spelled DIVI nation.com, as well as via iTunes and other free podcast servers. This is Paul O'Brien, reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways Radio and podcasts. And thanks again to Nisha Manek and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways conversation.